I think this theme that we'll return to throughout this episode is maybe a major one, which is technology's ability to impact social change. And when social change happens, there are winners and losers in the outcomes of that social change. And I think one thing that maybe AI has a parallel with crypto today is crypto very much feels like it's under nation state attack. I don't know, Sam, if you've heard about Elizabeth Warren's anti-crypto army. We've got privacy developers in jail, the developers of Tornado Cash, for instance. We've got Gary Gensler, regulator at the SEC. He thinks everything is under his control. Everything that's tokenized is his. I guess I have a question for you that is general. Maybe you can help us make sense of this. Why does it seem like the nation state is attacking crypto? Is it all in our head, or is this related to the idea that you opened with, this idea that technology impacts social change and restructures societies, and some people don't like that change and are resisting it? Is that what we're experiencing in crypto, some of that resistance?
Yeah, I mean, we'll get into this later, but liberal democracy, as we understand it in the modern nation state, is a product of a particular technological equilibrium. Like, institutions are adapted to the state of technology. And therefore, it's one thing if you're inventing a better mousetrap, but if you invent new firmware to run the economy on, you pose a direct threat to the sovereign, so to speak. And so I think it's not surprising, sort of political theory 101, that if you pose a direct threat to the sovereign is going to hit back. And in some ways, it's sort of like a huge endorsement to crypto. Like the more there is this attention from the Gary Genslers of the world, the more you should think that where there's smoke there's fire. That this actually poses a sort of challenge to their regulatory oversight. And it's also interesting, Gensler's also had a foray into AI now, where he's brought up AI as a potential systemic risk to financial markets.
He's done the AI pivot as well, hasn't he, Sam?
Yeah, aren't we all?
Yeah, Sam, if I wanted to reinterpret what you said, I think what the meaning I got out of that is that the state lags technology, as in technology moves forward and then the state has to catch up to it, right? There's some sort of equilibrium about the inventions that humans produce, and then the state naturally responds to that new equilibrium. They are not promoting, they are not the pinnacle of society, right? They have to catch up and establish new governance over the system. And so one thing I see as a big friction between the state and then also AI and crypto and AI paired, is that crypto is just so fast. If you exist in this industry, we move so quickly. We go in 4-year cycles, but if you were looking at crypto 4 years ago, it's irrecognizable to where it is today. And I kind of think AI is more or less the same. AI is also just increasingly accelerating in its velocity of what it can impact change in society. And there seems to be a friction here, right? Well, if technology is moving faster and faster and faster, and the state is always lagging technology, there seems to be just a friction that is produced between that gap. Do you see that friction as well?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're talking about exponential technologies running up against linear or even sublinear institutions. There's going to be a natural thing that, they fall out of step. Congress is only just now getting its hands around social media, and arguably not even that. So it does pose sort of, Peter Thiel has this indefinite optimism, definite optimism, indefinite pessimism, definite pessimism. Technology provides forms of indefinite optimism, right? We can just imagine a better world with technology. But for people in incumbent positions in government or other institutions, even incumbent corporations that could be disrupted by technology, there's a sense in which there's an ominousness to new technology that they have to do something about by default, because it poses a threat to existing ways of doing business. And I don't think this is any different. Nation states, not only do they act slowly, but think about our administrative bureaucracies. Relative to other nation states, they act even slower, right? We have, if you want a new regulation, you go through multi-year notice and comment periods where the public, and really by the public we mean lobbyists, get a chance to give their 2 cents, and then that has to go through an interagency review process, and that whole thing gets challenged in court. New York can't even introduce congestion pricing without being sued for multiple years. And so and so ironically, that slowness actually creates a demand for alternative modes, right? Alternative modalities. If you can exit the system, so to speak, and accelerate through a different track, through an alternative economic arrangement, through alternative, alternative distribution channels, then you can just like end run the entire system. And that's fundamentally why I think there's been this crackdown both on social media and new media from sort of incumbent media groups, and now also from the incumbent financial interests, a crackdown on crypto. It's not necessarily that they see the technology as inherently bad. It's that it's moving quicker than they can keep up with. And so their solution is to try to slow things down so that they can catch up rather than just letting things rip.
So you're saying their solution is to slow things down, although sometimes it feels like they're doing more than slowing things down, Sam. They're trying to actually stop things. They're trying to shut them down. They're trying to ban them. They're trying to make them illegal. And the thing that has surprised me, I guess, a little bit is you said that technology can often bring a political threat to the sovereign, and yet I would assume that in some societies, that political threat would be more severe than others. For instance, America, at least American values, as purported on paper in its best light, and we don't often live up to these values, is a nation state and a society that is supposed to value technology. It's supposed to value freedom. These are supposed to be enshrined in our values. And so the pushback from the US on crypto in particular has been a little jarring for me. I guess maybe some might say that's naive, like, Ryan, you should have anticipated that, but it just feels very much in conflict with the values that we put in the American white paper. I'm wondering if you could reflect on that. And then I'm hoping we can dig into these words like freedom and technology and what they actually mean and why they're important.
Yeah, I mean, if you look back at history or other transformative technologies, take the printing press, right? Printing press, early 1500s. It really doesn't start to diffuse, though, until the next century, in the early 1600s. That's when you start to see every little township, every little shire in England having their own printing press. And actually, up until that point, the UK Parliament had an ecclesiastical licensing regime. If you wanted to print a book in England, you had to get the licensing board's permission. And it was a bunch of priests that, made sure it didn't offend anybody. And that was consistent with the Church of England and so forth. Once printing reached a kind of point of criticality where it was so diffused across the countryside, enforcement completely broke down. The licensing board collapsed. There was this explosion of new publications, the nonconformists, the Presbyterians, the New Puritans, all these minority religious groups that finally had a chance to speak. It's very reminiscent actually of like what the internet did. And what happened out of that was there was, the Civil War. There were also the broader wars of religion in Europe. And at the other end, we get modern nation states. And in particular, we get the founding of the American Republic. And in some ways, the American Republic was not just sort of a founder country, but it was also the first sort of printing press native country, right? The founders of the United States were sort of post-printing revolution and designing the society around that reality. And so, one hopes that we can undergo, absorb these new technologies consistent with our existing institutional setup. But then that brings in people like Balaji Srinivasan and others who sort of take this as inspiration that we need to found new institutions to be native to the internet age, to the crypto age, to the AI age. And that's going to be a running tension, I think, through the century. Like what institutions are able to evolve with technology, and where do we need to just displace and start over?
So that's a really interesting framing of the U.S., which is like one of the first societies built on a post printing press set of protocols. And I guess what you're referring to, Sam, is maybe some protections in the Constitution, sort of the enshrinement of freedom of speech and First Amendment type protections. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And also just the milieu, like it was a republic of letters, like the Federalist Papers. These were like this was like 17th century Usenet.
Well, it's very interesting because now we have these post-printing press societies, and America's now close to 250 years old, but we don't have any societies that have built on the native protocol of the internet. Maybe that gets into what some of Balaji is basically saying, is that our existing institutions are sort of fraying around the edges. And maybe that's what you're saying as well, Sam. Like, the governments of the world haven't been able to adopt to technology fast enough. So the protocols aren't like internet native, tech native type protocols. Is there something to that?
Oh, hugely. I mean, take social security numbers, the 9-digit number that wasn't created in 1935, right? It's no wonder our system is so full of fraud. The IRS individual master file, which basically runs the entire tax system, dates to the Kennedy administration and is written in assembly. We had during the pandemic this explosion in unemployment rolls, and people were lining up around the blocks because literally, like, the websites would go down at 9 p.m. The amazing thing about the internet is it doesn't have to have business hours, but yet it had to in this case because our systems are so outdated. So, like, purely on a technical sort of institutional firmware level, we have this growing chasm between sort of what you could describe as like the UX experience between the public and private sector, right? We get annoyed if our Uber doesn't arrive in 3 minutes, when that barely existed 5-10 years ago, and yet we are sort of like masochists about like government inefficiency, where we just have come to expect it as par for the course. But obviously
the DMV line is eternal and inherent.
Yeah, and I'm sure the DMV these days is better than it was in the 70s. But again, this is sort of linear improvements against exponential improvements in the background. And the more these things get out of step, the more we will not have sort of a gentle transition, the more there will be just things breaking.
To continue leveling up your crypto game, then you need to get on the Bankless newsletter. It's the world's most popular crypto email and is completely free. Just click below to sign up.